I'm not sure what happened to Madalena, so we're recording this here, and and she'll upload it afterwards to YouTube. We're doing something a little bit different today. First of all, we're light on attendance, a few things. Some people are traveling, some people have doctor's appointments. Um, yeah, I know it's slow going in this section, and it's really fascinating because this whole section that's taking us weeks and weeks is about this much of Fox's commentary. And we're gonna so and that hand in that way it's kind of easier because there's less commentary to read for me, burdened on me. But we're going to be doing a very different kind of study, I think, once we get past this section, which I think goes until 22 or whatever, chapter 22. Today, though, I want to do something a little bit different. I looked for midrashic traditions that utilize the verse from Proverbs, a verse from Proverbs to kind of spotlight biblical characters. This is something I've done before in Psalms. You find it quite a bit in Psalms. So we're not talking about halachic literature here, Talmudic literature, so much midrash. We're talking about Agadah, and it's a way to um, sometimes it's a way to enlighten us on the meaning of the verse in Proverbs. Sometimes it's just a way to comment on something they want to say about a biblical character. And it's interesting to try to guess which way is which, and sometimes perhaps they're mixed. Both approaches are merged. That has a lot to do with that quintessential um, question that we ask about midrash in general. Is it inventive midrash or is it supportive midrash? Um, so if I translate to this, is it as if, or is it that the sages are sitting around the table in the Beit Midrash learning together the book of Proverbs, and somebody says, "Oh, that's like so and so," or is it that they're reading Book of Kings or Numbers, and they say, "Ah, that reminds me that oh, you know what? We could say something additional about this guy because that's supported by this text in Proverbs." Does it matter so much? No, it's just part of the intellectual exercise, I think, though. So let's take a look at this in that way. That's kind of the theme for today. Don't know if that's going to stick to the second half. I'll try to have it. I'll try to do that for the second half of chapter 18 as well. We'll see if we can do that and get a taste of that. Um, and and as usual, I try to break down the units here according to some sort of inner logic. The first unit here has to do with oh social behavior or antisocial behavior. And the second section, it has to do with body parts, as that happens quite often. We see that many times that verses are kind of sewn together or connected by usage of specific things, but often body parts. Okay. So, Megan, can we begin with you, 1 through 3, as our resident expert in social and antisocial behavior?
Yeah. Um, those who isolate themselves pursue their desires. They disdain all competence. Fools do not desire understanding, but only to air their thoughts. Along with the wicked comes derision, with rogues contempt.
Okay. You want to take first shot at that? Anything come to mind? Or anybody really? I don't want to put you on the spot.
The middle one, I can. Fools do not desire understanding, but only to air their thoughts. How many times have I been caught doing that? I don't know. Um, and
Yeah.
thought, oh God.
So now
Um,
you're talking about yourself and not others.
talking about me, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We ask ourselves after we have that conversation with ourselves after an encounter with somebody, like, why did I say that?
Why did I say that? Oh,
Yeah. Something just struck me though, unintentional, because the usage of the term I think is late 20th century. Um, but only to air their thoughts. We
that's
talk about people who are airheads.
airheads. Yeah.
I know that means something slightly different, but yeah, people want to talk. Look at, I noticed this in coffee houses. I shared with you before. I have a little. I'm not diagnosed, but I'm self-diagnosed with hypersensitivity of a sort. I can't shut out the conversations I hear. Sasha can sit there and be absolutely oblivious of it all. And I'll see something like that. The priest will walk out. I said, "Boy, I hope she goes to the police or something like that." She says, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Did you hear what they said to, people are, and what people will talk about in public?" Coffee houses seem to be a little, restaurants are a little bit more subdued, where people are absolutely unaware of who's listening to them are in airports
Right.
and airport lounges in particular. In the business lounge, people have conversations about their business. I was in a lounge years ago, an El lounge, and there was a yeshivish therapist who was on the phone with the mother of one of his he from I heard the entire conversation. And I said to him afterwards, I said, "Are you sure that you want your patient to to know all that stuff you just shared with everybody?" And he just gave me a dirty look. He says, "What did it bother you?" I said, "It should bother you." But that's just typical. I find that all the time. So people want to talk and they talk about anything. Let's go back to this. I'm sorry. Which I just did right now, right? I just talked about anything. I just let it go. Um, okay. Any other initial comments or thoughts? Okay. The first verse is a little bit sticky. Sticky. It's a little bit challenging because while it makes sense, those who isolate themselves pursue their desires. In other words, they don't care. They're self-centered. They're egotistical. That's the way the English reads. Lita'ava yivakesh nifrad. The the one who sets themselves aside will, yeah, that can be that, except for from a grammatical point of view, it should have a possessive suffix to it. That's at least Fox's view. And Fox reads here together with the Septuagint, the Greek translation, um, the word ta'ana or to'ana, which is pretext. So therefore, he would read, um, let me get his translation just a second.
Rabbi, where's Tan now?
No, so he doesn't read ta'ava.
Oh, he was
Reads
Tan. Huh?
ta'ana or ta'ava, ta'ana or to'ana. Um,
Right.
the vav and a nun are almost exactly the same. And in a
Mm,
scribe, it's sometimes hard to know the difference between a vav, a nun, and even a yud. But a vav
mm,
and a nun, a vav goes down mostly a single line with a little chupchik at the top. In some scripts, there's a chupchik at the top of a nun as well. It's just a shorter chupchik than the one
mm,
and the nun sofi um, is also just a straight line, and at different times,
mm. It goes down further than the regular no, no.
right, right. So they're just very, very similar.
Mm,
The kind of similarity between a dalet and a resh,
mm,
or between a bet and a kaf. And so you might remember Greenberg's blessed memory, his rules for emendation, his own rules, but
right.
one, what's wrong with the word the way it is, the way it's written. And so Fox would say because it needed a genitivus, genitive, you guys, possessive suffix, possessive kind of, yeah, it would need that. Two,
Mm,
you can explain, you have an ancient testimony to what the word might be otherwise, in this case, the Septuagint, which means that the person translating read a different word. Otherwise, wouldn't have translated what he translated. And three, you can explain how it happened.
mhm,
Right. Okay. So the his entire his whole translation for this verse is, sorry, the misfit seeks pretexts, he attacks all competence. All right. So it also, if it's a pretext for an argument or for some sort of strife, then that kind of makes sense that he says better with disdaining all competence as well, competence and getting into a fight as opposed to desire. But it could read both ways. We're going to see another example today that it's really hard to decide which way to read it. In this case, though, it's not like a word that can have different meanings. That could be poetic. In the poet's mind, the poet uses a word intentionally that has multiple meanings. And all those meanings are correct. Here, either the text was this or it was this or that. And this is all over the Hebrew Bible, less so in the Torah, but well, but in other places as well. Okay. Uh, let's see. So there's a word also, Yidgalah, or Yidgaleh, with the ayin at the end. It's not a word I'm familiar with so much, but it is it's disdain, and it's one of these words that's favored by Proverbs. Most of the times it appears in the Hebrew Bible is in the book of Proverbs. And it also kind of rhymes, sounds like there's assonance to the word in the fourth line, behit galot, libo. And so we've seen that before also. Sometimes there's the things are the couplets are brought together because there's something in the music of the reading that is similar as well. Anything else from the simple context, from the textual, the contextual meaning? Yes, I think.
Well, if we weren't reading Proverbs and we read those who isolate themselves pursue their desires, I could understand it. An artist who isolates himself just to pursue their art, or a writer, or anything. Just we read about those people who they need to isolate themselves in order to pursue their their dream, their what they want,
Their passion, is
their
that the word?
passion. Thank you. Yeah.
So tava could be passion. Tava is often it's interesting. Nobody here went to yeshiva, I think, but in the yeshiva world, they'll say he has a taiva. A taiva is almost a yetzer hara kind of a thing. It's not passion is something positive. Has an appetite, a not so good appetite for something. Tavtan is somebody who's it's not said a complimentary way, as somebody who's constantly running after pleasure. Yes, Madalena.
Hi. Um, I was thinking, how about those who isolate themselves to deal with something that is not necessarily desire, but it's like isolating due to I don't know, maybe mental health. Would they maybe be disdaining competence as in someone in the community can help them?
I certainly think that's it, and that goes together with other things that we're going to read in the next section. Um, so I kind of looked at this in a mental health or social antisocial behavior kind of way, but it doesn't have to be that way. I hear what Eileen is saying. Let's look at this perhaps in a complementary way. But then it doesn't. Then Eileen, what would you do with the second line?
Well, I would say, instead of competence, I would say criticism. I mean, yeah.
Okay.
But,
So
but
Tushiado is not Tushia is a word that means competence. It means getting stuff done. So in any case, okay. It could also be if we go to your artist artist interpretation, very often people who do something they're good at, they have disdain for anybody else who's doing it as well, right? That person doesn't know what they're talking about. They don't
right.
know that you call that art, you call that music,
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Uh, Rabbi Malka, any other comments on this section before we
I
do?
was going to ask about Yikala, disdain, but I think you just answered it.
Yeah, I looked at it. It's not a word I know. I'm a little embarrassed because it's not a single, there's a lot of singular words here in Proverbs. We've seen them. Hapax logomenon. I'm not pronouncing that right, but whatever the correct pronunciation is, we have a word that only appears once in the Hebrew Bible. So I did look it up. You may know, Malka, that Safaria has a BDB online as well.
Hmm.
So, I mean, I have a BD. BDB is the classical dictionary from the beginning of the 20th century, I think, more or less. that
Right.
I spent a lot of money when I was in my first year of college buying. That is, you know, it's like Oxford Press or something.
Right.
And I'm very proud of it. And I think I got one for our daughter also when she was studying Bible at Hebrew University. But now, of course, it's online. You can, with a
Oh,
click,
I
you
see
can get to
that.
it. It's much easier
But
than
it's
going
still a
upstairs.
valuable resource,
Yeah, it's just for me, it's much
especially
easier
because
than
SR Driver was involved. Anything that SR Driver wrote is worth it. And he was
absolutely, yeah,
involved in that enterprise, right?
absolutely a commentary on Exodus, Deuteronomy. Anyway, it's just easier for me not to walk upstairs, get the book,
Mm.
page through it, deal with the dust. Okay, all right. Then let's go ahead. So Malka, why don't you read for us from Babylonian Talmud Nazir?
Rava expounded a verse homiletically, and some say it was Rabbi Yitzhak. What is the meaning of that which is written? Quote, he who speaks himself, separates himself, seeks his own desire, and snarls against all sound wisdom. He who separates himself seeks his own desire. This is Lot, who separated from Abraham, and snarls Yekalah against all sound wisdom. This too describes Lot as his shame was eventually revealed, Nitkalah, in the synagogues when his actions recorded in the Torah are read in public, and in the study halls where the halakot of his descendants are taught. As we learn in the Mishnah, an Ammonite and a Moabite are prohibited from entering the congregation by marrying a Jewish woman, and their prohibition is permanent.
Okay, so a few things going on here now in this homily or this interpretation, which is either Ravan or Rav Yitzchak, Rabbi Yitzchak, and so the first one is kind of simple, right?
Mhm.
He who separates. Who's the one who separates? Oh, that's Lot. When did Lot separate himself? Anybody?
When they
Yeah, when he traveled with his uncle to Canaan, they went different places to settle, and went chose where he, I guess, thought it was better for animals.
Right. The text explicitly says that Avram says, listen, this place is it's too small for the two of us. Let's split up. You take that way. You choose which way to go. And Lot, selfishly took the greener area for pasture. Of course, that also put him in the area of Sodom and Gomorrah, or Sodom and Amorah. We think of Sodom and Amorah today that have been in that area as a desolate, like another planet. It looks like the moon. And so there's nothing grows there because of the salt in the soil and everything. But of course, that comes afterwards, only the destruction of those two places, then it, from the biblical historical point of view. So that's the separating himself, and he plays so that's the nifrad. He separates himself. Then comes something interesting. The Yidgalah snarls, which is disdain in our translation, but the same thing with an ayin. There's a play on words here. In the same way that he Yidgalah, then who Nidgalah? He becomes exposed, and that's with a hey at the end. But it doesn't bother the rabbis because that's the play on words. They're they're the assonance as well, and that's also the same assonance is on the fourth line. Idgalut, idgalot, Bihidgalot, the showing of. Um, uh, okay, so what happens in the synagogues exactly?
when we read that Torah portion
Right,
about Lot.
and what do we read about him in particular? It's not it's not referring to
Even
this.
about his daughters and the union, what happened, Moab and Ammon.
Exactly. It's talking about where his daughters seduce him at night, wanting to get him drunk and have babies with him. In other words, he separated himself and he got burned. Look at him. He got that's what happens to people like that. And then, but it's even more so because he got burned in the in other words, he's disgraced in the synagogue. His character is disgraced in the synagogue when they read the story, but also in the Beit Midrash. Also in the study hall, when the students learn what exactly it is, well, you're not allowed to marry, and the halacha is that can't marry a Moabite and an Ammonite, and so
Except for Ruth and Boaz.
of course, and that's the whole point of
Mhm.
Ruth, to show That author shows it, and of course, you know what the rabbis say there, right? Doesn't say you're not allowed to marry a Moabitess, just a Moabite. Moabitess is fine. That's the rabbinical interpretation there. Okay, so good example of how, again, hypothetically, is this rabbis sitting around learning Proverbs and they say, oh, that reminds me of the story of Lot? Or is it rabbis sitting around or students sitting around reading the story of Lot and say, that reminds me of what's in Proverbs? Whatever it is, it's a great example of midrashic intertextuality, right? This is nothing new what I'm saying, right? This is very standard, but we're on a particular theme of when the latter text comes to illuminate the earlier text in narrative. Okay. Dan, why don't you read for us from Midrash Tanchuma?
How did Jacob know when to go into his father so that Esau would not precede him and receive the blessing?
Okay, we know that context. Everybody remembers the context, right? I hope. Yes. Yes, I'm looking around. Rita,
Yes.
Claire, everybody. Okay, so in other words, Esau and Jacob, they both want the blessing. Jacob tricks him out of it, and he tricks him twice. First of all, when he's hungry that time, and then this is the point where Jacob is going to dress up. His mother dresses him up with Esau's clothes, and he smells like the field. And she made a dish in the kitchen as opposed to Esau, who was doing it himself. Go ahead.
As soon as Esau went out to hunt, the Holy One, blessed be he, sent Satan after him to keep him from catching anything until Jacob had received the blessing. As it is said concerning Esau, set thou a wicked man over him and let an adversary stand at his right hand.
Okay, so let's dissect that for a second. Right. Supplying us with more details about the story we didn't know, right? What's the detail?
The Hasatan was sent to prevent Esau from coming back.
Right.
Saying in the Tanakh, the story, we don't know that.
Right. To stall, right? To stall, but of course we do know it because how do we know that, Malka? We don't know it from Breshit, we know it from Psalms. Right? In a wicked man over him, and let the adversary stand at his right hand. Satan is adversary. Yeah. Okay. So, but wait, it gets better. But wait, there's more. Go ahead, Dan.
How did he do that? When Esau caught a deer, he would tether it and then set out to catch another deer. In the meantime, Satan would release the deer that had been caught and permit it to escape. When Esau returned, he was unable to find the deer. He repeated this a second and a third time, and thus it says, a slothful man shall not catch his prey. He was forced to roam about for hours while Jacob received the blessings. Hence, scripture states, and Jacob was yet scarce gone out from the presence of Isaac, his father, that Esau, his brother, came in from his hunting. When the wicked Esau entered, he called out to his father impudently, let my father arise and eat of his son's venison. It is of him that scripture states, when the wicked cometh, there cometh also contempt. The words, let my father arise, sound as though he was issuing a decree. Jacob did not speak like that. He spoke gently, saying, arise, I pray thee, sit and eat of my venison.
You gotta love it, right? So this verse, which has nothing to do with that story at all, but is utilized in a larger framework, is it the main verse that makes this possible? No, it's an added on idea. There's the business. Beginning, I was just going to bring those lines, but I said it's too good not to bring the Satan stuff, right? With the tethering, etc. But we've got a whole story that's enveloped that's based on verses from Proverbs, another verse from Proverbs, and this one, and Tehillim. No, in this case, no. Yeah, and Psalms, but it compounds it by being specific. But it's not. In other words, if it just left it at the Satan's involvement, you could say that's God not playing fairly, or whatever. But here it brings in Esau doing something wrong, and you may remember that the biblical text does not have that much negative things to say about Esau. He's kind of a schlemazel, right? But here it adds, oh, you didn't realize. He said, get up. get up, Dad, eat now, instead of, oh, sir, Abba, please, why don't you maybe consider getting up? That kind of a thing. Okay. Comments or questions on this
I
midrash?
think I looked in the Tanakh at that, and he doesn't say it in the imperative like it's a command. I think he says it in the cohortative in Bereshit.
Yeah. So
So they just twisted it.
as one does when one wants to make a point, right? You didn't say pretty please. You only said please. You didn't say pretty please with sugar on top, cherry on top. Okay. Yeah, good eye. Absolutely. Just proving my point, I think, in general. Anything else? Okay, Dan, why don't you read another one from, so this is both Midrash Tanchuma, but as I've shared with you before, Tanchuma has different versions. And one major differences exist, overlapping, and I don't know how much percentage overlaps and how much is different between Shlomo Buber, Martin Buber's grandfather, Shlomo Buber's edition, based mostly on a particular manuscript, and comparing that to the printed edition, which was printed a few hundred years beforehand. Um, and and then there's other manuscripts that have still other things. That was my ta'ava. That was my passion when I was a doctoral student, doing those kind of things, looking at the different manuscripts and comparing them. And probably because I was so passionate about looking at the different manuscripts, comparing them, and trying to understand them, that I never got to the writing part of the PhD. Okay, so go ahead, C, please, Dan.
When Esau the wicked entered, however, the result was as Rabbi Aha and Rabbi Yohanan have said, Gehinnom entered with him. Thus it is stated, using the same verse, when the wicked one comes, there is also despising, and with disgrace, shame. When Esau arrived, Isaac perceived the house becoming hot, and so perceived Gehinnom. He began to scream and tremble, as is stated in Genesis. Then Isaac trembled exceedingly greatly.
Now, Malka, I'll save you the work. You don't have to go back to look it up. Of course, it means something else,
Mm.
right? But I love this idea, this description of when somebody angry, somebody who's problematic and proud walks into the house warms up, right? It's
Mm.
the negative energy fills the yeah. Okay. All right. Comments or questions? Yes,
This
Megan.
this sort of goes sort of back to the one before this and this one. The rabbis have sort of twisted it around where it look in this simple story, I'm not looking at it, but not a simple story, but it was Esau who had the trick played on him. Not and they're saying that they're making him the evil one, where he was just
Exactly. Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's
it's like if you're going to bring Satan in here, who is being Satan? I don't know.
right. So go ahead.
Um, they really have, to me, twisted the character of Esau to fit what they wanted to come next. But
And not only to you, Megan, that's a comment of modern Jewish scholarship. I don't know, I can't think of a source that says that Esav got a bad deal, in rabbinic literature, medieval look comparing the two, but it was in the 20th century. I forgot who suggested it first, that the traditions of Esav are not about Esav, the historical or even the purported
Mm.
to be historical Esav. Esav
Eat.
comes from a place called Seir, Esav and Seir. That's his second name, the hairy one. Esav, he also represents Edom, the red one. Those are
Mhm.
three names that are associated in biblical literature with the biblical character of Esav that became nations afterwards. And Edom is the code, code. It has code in it. I mean, not just a code. There's a phrase that has code in it. Esav is a stand-in for Rome.
Right. Right.
Edom. So, and in the beginning, it was the earlier midrashic traditions are thought to be or understood to be, and I think this is, to me, this rings true, to be, poking fun, somehow deriding the Roman
Mm,
occupation of the land of Israel.
mm,
And then when Rome became Christian, it became shtochs, became insults to Christianity. So when you see Esav and Seir and Edom in Midrashic literature, it's not talking about the biblical story anymore. It's talking about what's happening in their time,
mm,
utilizing that story to, to deal as a to let out like an steam cooker. What do you call the pressure thing? Okay. What's it called? Where it lets out the extra pressure?
mm.
Valve.
Valve?
Yeah.
Wow.
An escape. In other words, the tension that anti-Semitism, the persecution brought up. How do you deal with it? One way of dealing with it is with satire, with literature, with
Mhm,
humor. And we've seen that all along. Of course, you see that with Haman.
mm,
You see that with Amalek.
mhm.
It's all across. So that's what's really happening there. Um,
What would the date? What's the date of this of the Tanhuma
you know,
of the?
if
Mhm,
you look in, I forgot who wrote it. Maybe Yonah Frankel wrote the entry in the Encyclopedia Judaica. He puts it at like some people put it 8th or 9th century. My own
mhm.
experience taught me that I don't think that this was written after the editing of the Babylonian Talmud.
Right.
Because whenever there's some people will say, oh, it's after that because it quotes Babylonian Talmud. What I found in the passages that I examined closely is that when there's a section from the Talmud, it's sometime only in one manuscript, and it's brought
Mm,
in toto to that space, which just means that the scribe, when he was copying the material, says, "Oh, I know something else that should go here as well." They freely did that with Tanhuma especially, and so I would say 6th or 6th century, 5th or 6th century, land of Israel. But of course, I'm also not up
mhm.
to date on that kind of stuff. I don't know what
Right.
people are saying these days.
So
So
when the
middle.
general,
Go ahead.
no, I was saying when the general person that was sitting in the Beit Hamid, that was sitting in the synagogue, heard these, did they think that these things were really part of the story? Because many of them probably weren't literate that they could read the Torah for themselves. So when they heard that, well, yes, this is about Lot and this is about, did they think that was really part of the Torah story?
So my response is going to be like this. My impression is that yes, they thought this is one of the ways of understanding the story. I don't think that in our tradition we the what's the real story is kind of a modern question. What's the
Mm-mm.
real? How do we get to the historical thing? Some of my Christian colleagues will sometimes say, "Yes, but that's not what the text really means in the New Testament." Really? How do you know what it really meant 2,000 years ago? So but there's things that fall in the parameters of being reasonable from their point of view. Listeners here that yes, that is a meaning of the text, a, a good version of the story. But there's other versions of the story which are equally truthful. That's kind of the point of what I when I in my teaching and study of history of interpretation. That's kind of the point, is to show that our text, the idea that I don't know when it was first said, but the phrase that Rabbi Malka, Shivim Panim Torah, there's 70
Mhm.
faces of the
Cases,
Torah.
right.
It's Talmudic. I don't remember where, but that's part of who we are. That's in our fiber of Jewish hermeneutics, and it's not broken down into schools. So that was done in the 19th and 20th century to break it down into methodology in schools and things, but it flowed in a natural way. So yes, I think that they thought that, and then the rabbis will sometimes say, yes, but it says in another verse this, they'll argue about that. But that kind of arguing, trying to get to the real story, is not so much about Agadah, it's about halacha.
Alaka.
And the reason is because in the end, somebody you have to have some sort of a standard of behavior. Not everybody can do whatever they understand from the Torah. There's got to be certain things, but even then, there's parameters and multiple ways. There's Beit Shammai, Beit Hillel. There's
Mhm.
Rabbi
So
Akiva,
is this a valid interpretation for 2025 in our time?
Oh, okay. Is it a valid interpretation?
Hmm.
So I guess it depends on what we mean by the word valid.
Mhm.
If there's an interpretation which causes hatred and and strife between us and another body of people, for instance, in this case, Christianity, I don't think it's invalid. I think it's important to read it, but to put it in its cultural context, which is what I tried to do when Megan
Mhm.
said, this doesn't seem to be right. It's different from that. It's to put it in its of when it's written. So to me, that doesn't mean it untrue. It means that I don't see this as something I want to espouse as part of my to
Mhm.
inform my way of life,
Right.
my choices that I make. Does
I know
that,
people always use that phrase, Jacob have I loved, Esau have I hated.
yeah.
And you actually brought light to that for me. I said, yes, Esau is Edom, Esau is Rome. And that's what they're probably really talking about. Well, yeah. Well, Rome wasn't really at that period of time when that's quoted. So when people say things like that, I kind of cringe.
Yeah, yeah. That word validity we need to question what do we mean exactly by that.
Mhm.
Again, amongst some progressive clergy, Christian clergy friends of mine, it's a negation of the possibility of that even being the meaning.
Mhm.
That's invalid today. No, it's valid when you're living 2,000 years ago or 3,000 or 200 years ago. Let's take a look at why it was thought to be valid. On the other hand, it's also important in my mind to have parameters. Not every text can mean anything. I remember when I was at Hebrew University and I went to this new minyan that people said we're trying to make a young people that, and a guy got up to speak and said it was Hanukkah. And he said, um, oh, he said something that was based on absolutely no imaginative grammar. Like he made up, everybody knows that that letter interchanges with that letter. The kind of things you hear in the Kabbalah Center, people that have been there.
Mhm.
And I think you say to yourself, you had a nice thing. You didn't have to go there, but you ruined it by pretending that you were being scientific. This pretending kind of a thing. Um, anyway, I think it's important to, and to me, that's why I studied in a conservative movement seminary as opposed to the Reform movement seminary, because the emphasis put on Talmudic and rabbinic study far more than I think even today. Um, uh, uh, I'm more comfortable with knowing a lot about different stages of Jewish literature as opposed to just saying, looking at the biblical text, say, well, I think that's what this means today.
Mhm.
People do that all the time, but I'd like to have those steps in between, which is why I use rabbinic literature as much as I do. Okay. Anything else? Well then, Eileen, you want to read for us 4 to 9?
Sure.
Now we're in the world of look for the body parts here.
The words a person speaks are deep waters, a flowing stream, a fountain of wisdom. It is not right to be partial to the guilty and subvert the innocent in judgment. The words of fools lead to strife. Their speech invites blows. The fool's speech is their ruin. Their words are a trap for them. The words of a grumbler are bruising. They penetrate one's innermost parts. One who is slack at work is akin to a vandal.
Okay. I think I misled you because I said to look for body parts, and I think in the English there's only one, innermost parts.
Innermost part.
But if you
The
look at
Hebrew,
the
right?
Hebrew, can you see the words that are in bold in the
P,
Hebrew?
P,
Those are all body parts.
Makor,
Except for Makor is a source of it. Makor
course.
is where the water's flowing. But that's why yeah. So initial reactions, comments, what stands out? Okay, in the first 2 lines we have, did you want to say something? Go ahead.
Just as far as stands out, the third and fourth lines, I guess, is verse 5. Sounds like something directly from Torah. Not right to be partial to the guilty and subvert the innocent in
Mhm.
judgment.
Yeah, yeah. similar as to Deuteronomy, and I think there's studies on the connections between Proverbs and Deuteronomy, if I remember correctly from my years in college. Yeah. Said it, yeah. So the poetics of the first two lines are interesting in what happens here. So there's deep water. That's right, deep waters. Maim amukim, or deep water. Are the words the words from the mouth of a person, of a man. Now, as opposed to a person speaks, which puts in a verb, it's not. It's just nouns. Divrei, words of mouth, man. This assumes a good man, of course, right? Not any man. We've got to assume there's a good man from the context. So the words is the literal meaning, is the literal piece, right? And the metaphor is waters, right? Waters are a metaphor, okay? Then you have a nachal, a flowing stream, and a makor, which is a well or a spring, can mean. You've got two more metaphors that talk about a flowing stream and that talk about wisdom. And he makes the observation here that it merges the metaphorical with the literal. That's something I didn't really know how to put in words. That sometimes you have a metaphor that stands for the literal, and then they merge, they're intertwined together. And that's what happens in the second line. Nachal novea makor chokhmah. Yeah, but it's clear. We're talking about words and wisdom, and then this idea of water. And in other kind in other passages or in other wisdom traditions, the water is cool and refreshing. The water is calming. You think of again, in hot climate, desert climates, dry climates, water and all its positive aspects. I don't think that if you lived in a flood zone, you'd speak this way, right? So these are words for Southern California, but not necessarily for Chicago. Is wisdom flowing up from that river? What's the river that flows in the middle of your city?
The Chicago River.
Oh, that's a creative name.
It flows backwards. They reversed the flow of the river because garbage was going out into the lake. Anyway.
So then one might ask, is it wiser? Was it wiser then or wiser now? Yeah, okay. All right. So what else do we have? We would say there's another word, interesting word for those that read the Hebrew on the line number 7, piksil, the mouth of a foolish person as opposed to the mouth of a person who's a smart person. Piksil, mechitalo is destruction, ruin. And here I'm saying, where is that word coming from? Also, Malka, I don't know that word. But it appears a number of times in Proverbs and once I think in Psalms maybe. And there's no verb in BDB. There's no verb associated with it. It's just a noun. That's the noun. I don't have any other. And then there's another linguistic thing. Divrei nirgan kmit lahamim. The words of a grumbler. So nirgan we have there is in beginning of Deuteronomy. There's that rognim, I think it says, or yeah, I think it's rognim. Ragan is to complain. Not a common verb, but in Proverbs it comes up quite a bit. But then you get this word mitlahem, to lihitlahem. Litlahem in modern Hebrew is to fight with, is to get in a fight, is to bruise, is to. And that is what we find in Palestinian Aramaic. So second half, first millennium, second half of the first millennium, not only, but a lot from the Jerusalem Talmud, some from the Midrashim, which are the Midrashim of Eretz Yisrael. There's a dictionary edited by a guy named Klein, which has that kind of Hebrew. So in Aramaic, in that kind of Palestinian Aramaic, post-biblical Aramaic, then this is a verb that has to do with bruising. But if you look at the Arabic and some other, and perhaps also in non-Jewish Aramaic, it's a word that has to do with something tasty. So the words of a grumbler are tasty, are delicious, are delicacies, as Fox translates. And they penetrate one's innermost parts as they go down, it literally, and they go down to his abdominal region. So
Mm.
you hear again, the metaphor is the tastiness of the words, and you eat them, and you feel good with that kind of. Anyway, Dan, why don't you do A for us, please?
Was further taught, it is not good to respect the person of the wicked, meaning it's not good for wicked people when they are respected in this world and are not punished for their sins. For example, it was not good for Ahab to be respected in this world, as this stated. Because he humbled himself before me, I will not bring evil in his days. And Ahab thereby lost his share in the world to come.
Okay, so just a quick crash course on Ahab, whose wife was Izebel or Isabel. No, King Ahab wanted a poor man's vineyard for his own garden or something.
Naboth's vineyard.
Yeah, Kerem Navot, yeah.
Mhm.
And so he didn't know what to do. Izebel takes over. Don't worry, let me take care of it, husband. And she uses his stamp and everything, and they frame this guy for cursing the king and cursing God, and they stone him. And he's put up to it. And then Elijah gets sent into the picture, and he says the famous words, "Ha haratzachta v'gam yarashta." So you murdered and then you inherited the murderer's possessions. And so Elijah sent to prophesy against him, and Ahab does tshuva. He fasts and sits in sackcloth, right? Like the end of the book of Jonah. And so because he did this, he was spared. He didn't get killed by God. But that's only in this world. He lost his share of the world to come because he's an evil person. So there's that, and then there's this. Continue, please, Dan.
The opposite is also true. The complete verse states, it's not good to respect the person of the wicked, to turn aside the righteous in judgment, meaning it's good for the righteous when they are not respected in this world and are punished in this world for their sins. For example, it's good for Moses, he was not respected in this world, as is stated, because you did not believe in me to sanctify me. Had you believed in me, your time still would not have come to depart the world.
What sounds like he's getting the bad end of the deal, but what it means essentially is that, okay, you didn't live, you had to die at some point, right? 120 years, but you had to die. But in the world to come, he's got it made. So, so I think for those who are not used to this kind of midrash, and what I'm getting from the questions and the comments today is that, well, yeah, but that's not the story. The story should be read differently. So it's again, it's the ability to read stories, the older stories, in many ways for the particular occasion. So
Mhm.
if something was happening in the village, pure hypothetical, what I'm saying, it's happening in the village where the Torah is being read, and the rabbi gets up to speak on Shabbat, and they had just lost somebody who was so well respected. People are like, how is that fair? How is it fair that God took that person? Well, okay. There was something a little bit wrong that he did, so he didn't live as long as he wanted to. He didn't get to go into the land, but he will have Olam Haba. He'll have the world to come. And the opposite is true as well. There's the wicked guy that gets to live a long life and benefit whatever. Yeah, yes, of course, that's what you see now, but wait till he gets to the afterlife. Boy, is he going to suffer, right? And yes, those things are very Jewish. They're not biblical, but they're very Jewish, very
Mhm.
not just rabbinic, but all kinds of Jewish. Okay,
I
read it.
could see
Would you?
why that would
Oh,
be in Tractate Yoma.
oh, why would it be there? I
I
don't
could
know.
see. I think I
Oh, you
see
could
when
see,
you
yeah.
explained it. Yeah.
Right. Although that's a dangerous game to play, Malka, as you well know, I
Mm.
think, is that very often, in this case, it's kind of clear, but very often it's like, what is that doing there? Right. We can understand why the laws of Hanukkah and the story of Hanukkah are in Masechet Shabbat because it's in the context of the materials you should use for lighting the candles. But there's so many, why should dreams be in brachot, in a tractate, so it often has to do in Talmudic editing. Sometimes it's Rabbi so and so, especially if he's not so common. But even there'll be just somebody says, "Oh, I have another tradition from him. I have another tradition from him," and then you totally get off in a tangent, much in the way that I often get in a tangent talking about things that have no connection whatsoever to our text. Go ahead, Dan. If you'd read the next one, please.
He spoke to Korach and to his entire congregation, saying, Morning, the Lord will disclose who is his and who is holy, and will bring him near to him, and whom he shall choose, he will bring near to him. He said, Morning, the Lord will disclose who is his. Why is it so? Rabbi Natan said, The Holy One, blessed be he, said, If all the magicians of the world gathered and sought to transform morning into evening, they would not succeed. Just as I distinguished between light and darkness, so I distinguished Aaron to sanctify him with the sanctity of the highest order. Immediately, Moses sent to summon Datan and Aviram, sons of Eliav, and they said, We will not go up. We will not go, and we will not come are not written here, but rather, we will not go up. A fool's mouth is ruin for him. Okay, citing something we read. They opened their mouths for punishment, saying they would lie in descent and not in ascent. They would, die in descent and not in ascent. Just as they said, so they died. They and everything that was theirs descended alive into the abyss.
Okay. The context of this is the rebellion of Korach and his folks. Datan and Aviram are two of the people involved in that. And they challenged Aaron's authority to be the priest, and also by extension Moses' authority. And of course, how were they punished? The ground opened up and swallowed them. So in getting to using the verse that we had that says that a fool's mouth is ruined for him, in other words, idiots. They said, we will not go up. They didn't say we will not come, we will not go, we will not go up. Lo na'aleh. And what's the opposite of going up? Going down.
Yeah.
Playful midrash. Of course, unless you're Dotan and Aviram, it's not so playful, but a playful midrash to make the verse from Proverbs come alive, and to also explain perhaps why Dotan and Aviram, it's fuzzy in the story exactly what the relation between them and Korah, because it's different traditions or sources that have been woven together. Perhaps why they were included in the falling into the earth as well. Yeah. Okay. Harold, you want to read the last one for us? See?
Okay. Midrash Esther Rabbah. Even one who is lax in his work is brother to a master of destruction. Even one who is lax in his work, as that is Ahashverosh, who canceled the construction of the temple, is brother to a master of destruction. That is Nebuchadnezzar, who destroyed the temple.
All right, and there's the longer tradition here that I edited for brevity is talks a lot about a comparison. How did they get to the fact that Ahashverosh and Nebuchadnezzar are brothers, and what did they do? And what it's referring to here is that Ahashverosh was the one who canceled the rebuilding of the second temple, whereas Nebuchadnezzar is the one who destroyed the first temple. My whole point was to say, taking this text totally out of context, right? One who is slack at work is akin to a vandal. So they're reading it in Hebrew, gam mitrapeh b'melachto, one who's slack in his work. Achu, he's a brother of, right? Of course, akin is much better translation. Doesn't mean a sibling, blood and flesh and blood brother. Achu leval mashchit. And who's the Baal Mashchit par excellence? The one who is the master of destruction in our tradition? Nebuchadnezzar. Yeah. So to sum up, basically, and then we'll take comments, is that, again, I was looking only today for midrashic interpretations that are less about elucidating the text, Proverbs text, which is usually my motivation, and instead how the texts were utilized or weaponized, in fact, sometimes, right, to prove a point about a biblical character, and I'm happy I was able to find things that were so across from all the way from Abraham to Hashverosh. Rita Claire, we didn't hear anything from you today. What give us a few reflections before we end.
I am confused. Okay, we start out talking about a person's character, why they stay silent and why they speak out, and then it goes on to Jacob and Esau, and from there on, I'm trying to make myself personally sense of the whole thing. I trying to understand the whole connection.
So maybe my advice would be to just look at the biblical passages in the boxes, to take out of that the wisdom that we're so used to talking about so much, and maybe to leave the other biblical connections out of it for now, because we were kind of studying on two totally different levels today. Very often, the rabbinic texts that I bring, whether they're early or they're medieval rabbinic texts, come to help us understand what's in the box above in the book of Proverbs. Instead of that, today I brought the what's in the text of the book of Proverbs, which is useful information. Although we might be getting a little bit tired. It's more or less, it feels like it's the same stuff in different words, in different clothes, and to show how those words were used in the first millennium. Let's say from the 4th century to the 8th century, were used by rabbis, taken out of their context and then brought into the context of the Torah reading or the reading of the biblical story. So that's why it was a little bit more confusing today than usual. David Friedman, anything? Okay.
Nothing specific, Rabbi. I'm double tasking as usual, reading energy legislation. Oh, and preparing for my award this afternoon.
Okay, well, mazel tov to you.
Thanks.
I want to share with you folks, only because it's happening as we speak. I am right now suing, as of this hour, the next hour, suing the county of Riverside and the sheriff of Riverside County in a suit together with another clergy person from Riverside, and people who are incarcerated right now. They're in jail right now on unethical and unlawful jail practices having to do with bonds, the bond schedule, how it's done, and how bond is set without seeing, not like in TV, without seeing the judge and arguing whether they're a risk or whether, how it's set automatically to a certain amount of money, very often for relatively light things, say for $10,000. And of course, people that are getting picked up for these things don't have $10,000, and they don't have even the $1,000 to give to the bail bonds, which they'll never get back, by the way, to put that bond. These are not people, we're not talking about people who there's a risk of flight or they're dangerous anyway. These are crimes that are more often than not brought down to misdemeanors, and in many cases are dismissed. So you've got people that are in jail, not just overnight. If they get picked up sometimes on a Wednesday night, they could be in jail until Monday. And the lawyers particularly chose this weekend because it was a long weekend. And I have standing because I pay taxes in the county of Riverside. And this is a model they used in Los Angeles. That's how they got to me, which was successful. The judge gave it a temporary injunction, which became permanent because the city there and the county changed their practices. So look out for an op-ed piece that I wrote coming out in the next few days. And I'm happy that I'm happy that we're all kind of part of this kind of stuff. So David, you should know about that as well. And on a more difficult and uncomfortable thing, I'll just say we're at that time of year where there's a slump in fundraising. We're after, where the December high of Jews do the booze, etc. A lot of people have moved away. A lot of people, some people are no longer able to for other reasons. So if you're able to make a donation to Or Hamidbar, it would be much appreciated. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you, some of you in person tomorrow for our last meeting of Jonah, and if not on Shabbat. Have a good middle of the week. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.